I trust everything is satisfactory.
Yes, thank you. Everything is well.
She accidentally called the cold billionaire boss baby. That same afternoon, he stopped in front of her desk and ordered her to say it again while looking him in the eyes. The entire office froze. Natasha did too. Cooper Halloran was the kind of man who fired people without raising his voice, walked through hallways as if no one was worthy of breathing near him, and never smiled at any woman, much less at a new assistant, exhausted, with a sick mother and overdue rent. She thought she was going to lose everything, but he placed his hands on her desk, leaned his face down until it almost touched hers, and whispered, "Say that again, but now look me in the eyes." And Natasha realized that, after that one word, maybe neither of them would be able to find their way back.
Hi, I'm Rowan. A special shout out to those of you watching Book 1 for free here on the My Stories platform, completely ad-free and uninterrupted.
Chapter 1. The Tower. She swore to conquer. The alarm went off at 6 in the morning, and Natasha Vale opened her eyes before the second beep. The room smelled of fresh fabric and sewing thread, as always. Her mother left scraps drying on a makeshift clothesline strung between the dresser and the window. Outside, Queens was still grey, with that low fog that usually foreshadowed long mornings on the subway. She sat on the edge of the bed, stared down at her bare feet on the cold floor, and took a deep breath. It was her first day, the first real day, with a badge, a steady paycheck, health insurance at the end of the month. Everything she had been chasing since she walked away from her third unpaid internship and started studying at night, with her notebook open on top of her mother's sewing machine. In the narrow bathroom, she pulled her dark hair into a low bun, washed her face twice and looked closely at the tired eyes in the mirror. There was a smudge of forgotten lipstick in the corner of her mouth. She wiped it with her thumb and murmured a small mantra to herself, the kind no one ever hears. Today you don't speak loudly. You don't draw attention. You don't make mistakes. The sink had an old crack that looked like a thin scar. She ran her hand over it, the way someone makes a silent promise to a home. Marisol Vale appeared in the kitchen doorway in her faded nightgown, her fingers still marked from the previous night's sewing. Mother and daughter shared the same profile, the same straight nose, the same way of tilting their head to listen. "Did you eat, sweetheart?" "I had some bread, Mom. I'll grab a coffee on the way." "You ate nothing," Marisol replied, with that drawn-out way of speaking that seemed to put tenderness into any sentence. "Sit down here. Have some tea with me." Natasha sat down. Not because she had time, she didn't, but because her mother insisted with the calm manner of someone who never admitted being tired. The tea came in the chipped rim cup, with a thin slice of lemon. Marisol rested her hand over her daughter's hand. Her fingers were cold. "Don't forget to eat at lunch, and don't let that boss step on you." "No one is going to step on me, Mom." Marisol smiled sideways, the way someone does who has already seen the world and chooses not to comment. "Promise me one thing. Promise me you'll come home in one piece today, no crying on the subway." Natasha laughed awkwardly and promised. She kissed her mother's forehead, picked up the bag where she had hidden, out of superstition, a copy of her own resume folded in 4 and headed out. The subway station was packed, as always. A child cried in his father's arms, 2 teenagers argued about a video on a phone, an older woman prayed quietly, clutching a rosary. Natasha rested her forehead against the train window and tried to mentally go over the names of the directors she needed to memorize by the end of the week. Halloran and Crow, an investment conglomerate that managed fortunes she would never touch even with gloves on. Headquartered on the top floor of a Manhattan tower, across from the park, with a private elevator for the CEO. The role was executive assistant, direct support to the top of the building. Ren had gotten her resume into the right hands, and the rest had been up to her. The tower appeared dead ahead in the skyline before she even left the station. Mirrored glass, dark steel along the edges, a discreet logo in bronze lettering next to the revolving door. Natasha took a deep breath on the sidewalk, gripped the strap of her bag and walked in. The lobby had high ceilings, light marble flooring, and 2 receptionists behind a curved counter. The air was cold, scented with something that reminded her of burning wood. Everything there seemed to remind her, without rudeness, that she didn't yet belong on that floor. 42nd floor, said the receptionist after checking her temporary badge. Wait for the receptionist there to come get you. The elevator took a moment too long. When the doors opened, Wren Ashby was standing on the other side in a grey blazer and the smile of someone who'd been up to something. She was laughing before she finished her sentence, as always. "Natty," she said, pulling her friend by the arm. "Take a deep breath, baby. This floor swallows people who breathe wrong." "What a great way to start the morning, Wren." "I'm being serious, but only a little. Come here." The glass-walled corridor led to the heart of the floor, and Natasha had to focus in order not to gawk like a tourist at the full park view spread out along the side. Wren showed her the workstation, a desk facing a closed glass door with a dual monitor and a white keyboard. She also introduced 3 colleagues, 2 directors who would only rush past, and the break room. "Golden rule?" Natasha asked, almost without a voice. "Don't look Mr. Halloran in the eyes unless you're called on," Wren replied, dropping her tone. "They say he only blinks during a leap year. They say he fired a guy just because of a misplaced comma in an email. Do they say a lot of things? And what's actually true?" Wren pursed her lips. "That he eats lunch alone, that he marks up reports without looking at whoever hands it in, and that, when he walks onto the floor, everyone here pretends to be busy." Natasha laughed breathlessly, smoothed her skirt and sat down. The computer asked for a temporary password. She typed it in, opened the first calendar, and it was at that exact moment that the air on the floor changed. There was no warning, just an almost imperceptible shift. An intern who had been leaning on the counter straightened up, 2 phones stopped ringing at the same time, and the sound of the private elevator opening at the end of the hall. Natasha didn't have to lift her head to know it was him. Cooper Halloran walked through the glass-walled corridor as if the tower had been built so that stride could exist. A well-cut black suit, a white shirt buttoned up to the very last button, low, silent dress shoes on the carpet. His hair dark, slicked back. His grey eyes seemed to land on nothing and at the same time take in everything. Natasha focused on her screen. She didn't look. She didn't breathe. She didn't blink. He passed her desk the way he passed everyone else's, without greeting, without glancing aside. He stopped at the desk of an analyst 2 cubicles down, picked up a bound report, read 3 lines, flipped the page, crossed out something with his pen, handed it back without facing the woman, and kept moving. The analyst stared at the paper as if she were holding a termination letter. Cooper kept walking. He reached the glass door of his office, placed his hand on the handle, and that's when it happened. Before turning the corner to go in, he pulled back half a step. Just half a step. He tilted his head a fraction of an inch in the direction of her desk. The grey eyes moved across Natasha's profile for 2 seconds, no longer than that. And then he turned the handle, walked in, and shut the door behind him. Nobody said anything. Maybe nobody noticed. Natasha started typing the first word that came to her head just to have something on the screen, and she couldn't remember how it was spelled. "You're pale," Wren whispered, stopping behind her chair. "Did you just see a ghost? I didn't see anything." "You sure? Imagination." Wren looked at her with that face of a stand-in sister who knows all the tricks. "Okay, imagination. Write it down." The rest of the morning went by in a blur of spreadsheets, copied emails, 2 coffees she never got to drink. By the end of the afternoon, Natasha had already turned in a redone travel report, scheduled a meeting that nobody wanted to take on, and tidied up the executive suite after a silent argument between 2 partners. The glass door of Cooper's office remained closed. On the subway home, she rested her head against the glass and closed her eyes. Her body ached, her shoes hurt more, and even so there was a strange humming in her chest, the kind where you can't tell if it's joy or alarm. At home, Marisol had already set the table. Vegetable soup, a piece of bread, filtered water in the usual pitcher. The needle was stuck into a piece of blue cloth next to the plate, waiting for dinner to be over. "So, sweetheart, how was it?" Natasha smiled before answering, the way you smile when you decide to spare the people you love. "It went well, Mom. Quiet. Just calendars and reports." "Quiet?" Marisol raised an eyebrow. "A first day in a fancy building, quiet." "Quiet." Marisol didn't push. She just lifted the blue cloth and went back to basting, with that quickness of fingers that almost felt like conversation. After dinner, Natasha did the dishes, lay down in bed with her phone in her hand, and tried not to think. Tried not to replay on a loop the 2 seconds in the hallway, the half step, the gaze that landed and moved on. That's when her phone buzzed. Ren. Natty, the voice came laughing before the message. You up? Yeah. Sit down. I'm lying down. Then lie down better. I just came down from the floor. Mr. Halloran called Diane into his office 5 minutes before he left. 5 minutes, Natty. And you know what he asked? Natasha sat up in bed. Ren, just spit it out. He asked the new assistant's name, your name, and he asked her to repeat it. Natasha stayed for a while with the phone pressed to her ear without saying anything. Outside, a dog barked, and the seamstress's window in Queens let in a cold breeze that she hadn't felt until that moment. Natty, you still there? I'm here, she answered softly. Good night, Ren. She hung up. She lay there, staring at the white ceiling with the clear sense that that first day, which was supposed to have been invisible, had left a trail that no longer depended on her. Chapter 2. Here, Baby. The rain started at 2 in the afternoon, one of those fine New York drizzles that don't soak you all at once, but slowly creep through the windows of conference rooms until everything ends up looking like an aquarium. Natasha had walked into that room at 11 after pulling an all-nighter the day before to close a travel spreadsheet that nobody else wanted to touch. Her eyes burned. Her pulse seemed slower than the rest of her body. It had been over 2 weeks since she'd started, and Cooper Halloran was still a grey figure on the perimeter of her life. He passed her desk twice a day. He stopped typing when she walked into the office with some document. He followed her mouth when she spoke to other people, but never on any of those occasions did he address her directly. Ren walked through the corridor that morning, stopped pretending to be busy, and rested her elbow on the divider. He looks at you like you're the only thing in the room, Natty. Stop making things up. I'm not. I watch him watching. It's different. Ren, I'm just saying, baby, when he stops typing, it's because of you. Get back to work, go on. Ren walked off laughing. Natasha turned her eyes to the screen and really tried to forget about it. During the afternoon meeting, she stumbled over 2 words in a row. She said quarterly instead of monthly, and had to start the sentence over. She felt the heat creep up her neck. Cooper was at the head of the table saying nothing, his pen between 2 fingers. He didn't correct her, he didn't interrupt, he just registered it. His silence stung more than any reproach. When the meeting ended, she stepped out quickly with the excuse of getting coffee for those who were staying behind. The break room was empty, with the soft sound of the machine dripping slowly, and the rain hitting the window outside. Natasha placed both hands on the counter, closed her eyes for a second. She tried to remember what her mother always said in moments like this. Something about taking 3 deep breaths before going back into the room. She filled a cup for herself and another for Cooper. She already knew he drank it black, no sugar, and that he usually finished the afternoon without asking for a second. She carried both cups back through the corridor. Her hands trembled a little. She blamed it on the exhaustion. Cooper was standing in front of her desk, not inside his office like he usually was, in front of her desk. He was speaking quietly with Phelan Crow, partner, widower, ring on his finger, short sentences, who greeted Natasha only with a nod and stepped away the moment she got there. Cooper stayed, standing, waiting. Natasha set her own cup down on the desk and held out the other to him. Without thinking, because exhaustion spoke up before caution did, she murmured, low in the most absent way in the world, "Here, baby." The entire office froze. It was a physical silence, the kind you feel in your shoulders before you understand. The intern walking by behind her dropped a whole folder onto the carpet and didn't even bend down to pick it up. Phelan, 2 steps ahead, turned half a step away and stood staring at the hallway clock while spinning the ring on his finger, like someone making up anything not to laugh. Cooper didn't move for a long instant. The grey eyes landed first on the extended cup, then travelled slowly up her hand, her wrist, her forearm, and stopped on her face. Natasha felt every inch of that path as if it had been done by fingers. Then he moved. He took the 3 steps that were still missing, with that silent, carpeted stride, and stopped in front of her desk. He placed both hands on the wood, one on each side of the cup she was still holding, and leaned in. His face came close enough for her to see for the first time that the grey eyes had a darker ring around the iris. "Say that again," he said, in the same low voice he used in meetings. "But now look me in the eyes." The air left her in pieces. For one wild second, Natasha thought about apologizing, about laughing, about saying it had been force of habit, that it had been exhaustion, that it had been anything other than what it had been. She lifted her chin. She held his gaze. "It was unintentional, Mr. Halloran. That's not what I asked." The rain hit the window harder. Someone somewhere on the floor coughed too loudly. Natasha felt her heart climb up to her throat and drop back down again. That's when she realized Cooper wasn't furious. There was on that closed face none of the signs she had mentally rehearsed: the locked jaw, the raised eyebrow, the icy silence that came before a firing. He was looking, yes, but not into her eyes. He was looking fixedly at her mouth, and he couldn't look away. Natasha felt the heat rise up her chest. She tightened her fingers around the warm porcelain of the cup. His hands stayed on the desk, just inches from hers. He didn't touch her. The air between their two fists felt like a stretched wire. "Mr. Halloran," she began, in a voice that came out steadier than she expected, "the coffee will get cold." For an instant longer than it should have, he stayed in the same spot. Then he raised his hand and took the cup she was still holding out. His fingers brushed over hers just enough for her to register the warmth of his skin, and he stepped back. "Come into my office, Miss Vale." The voice wasn't in a hurry. There was no threat in it. There was something Natasha couldn't name in that moment, and that she would only identify later, lying in bed in her mother's room. A contained curiosity, the kind she suspected he had learned to hide. He went in first. Phelan, when he passed Natasha, still spinning his ring, said softly, "Courage, sweetheart." She almost laughed. She didn't. She got up from her chair with her legs barely steady, straightened her skirt, walked the 3 meters to the glass door of his office, and went in. Cooper was standing behind the desk, the cup still in his hand. The room was spacious, with an entire wall of window facing the rain, and a bookshelf of leather-bound volumes in dark hide along the opposite wall. There were no personal photos in sight, just an old masculine watch resting on a small silver tray in the corner of the desk. "Sit," he said. Natasha sat, hands in her lap, back straight, chin still lifted. Cooper didn't sit. He set the cup on the desk without drinking. He walked to the window, stopped there for a moment with his back to her, his broad shoulders cut against the rain, and came back. "You're not going to be fired." The sentence crossed the room like a cold draft. "I didn't," she started. "I said you're not going to be fired," he repeated, and his voice dropped another tone. "But I need an assistant who doesn't speak in half words, Miss Vale. In here, words cost money. They cost people. Do you understand that?" "I understand." The grey eyes landed on her for the first time without any shielding. They lingered, and they left. "Now go. Finish the travel report. Put it on my desk before you leave." Natasha stood. She walked to the door. Before touching the handle, she hesitated, not out of courage, out of exhaustion, and turned half around just enough to look at the desk. Cooper was still standing in the same spot. He had picked up the pen with which he would have signed in some other reality her termination, and he put it away carefully in the top drawer. He pushed it shut. He locked it. She walked out. In the hallway, heads lifted. The intern with the dropped folder pretended to take a call. Wren materialized beside her in 3 strides and grabbed her by the elbow with a force disguised as affection. "Natty, don't say a word." "I won't say anything." "Wren, I'll say very little. Are you alive?" "Yes." "Do you still have a job?" "Yes." Wren took a deep breath the same way she laughed, before finishing. "Just tell me one thing. What did you call him, baby?" "Wren, I swear to God." Okay, I'll stop. But she didn't stop smiling for the rest of the afternoon. Natasha finished the report with a focus she didn't even know she had. She printed it, walked across the corridor, left the folder on Cooper's desk, who by that point was no longer in his office. She went back to her desk, shut down the computer, grabbed her coat. The rain had let up outside, but the grey had decided to stay. On the subway, she closed her eyes. She didn't sleep. She just replayed in her head, frame by frame, the second when he leaned over the desk, his fingers near hers, the air changing in nature, her mouth mirrored on his face, being read as if it were a word impossible to pronounce. At home, Marisol was sewing by the window. She lifted her eyes over her half-moon glasses. "You look different, sweetheart." "I'm just tired." Marisol didn't push. That was worth an entire conversation, but she spared her daughter whenever she could. Natasha went into her room, took off her shoes, turned on the old computer to check her email before bed. That's when her whole body locked up. There was a new message, HR, a one-line subject in plain font. Transfer to the CEO's private office, effective Friday 10:10, report to reception on the 43rd floor. She read it 3 times, read it again. She looked toward the window where her mother was still sewing with her back to her, the yellow light falling on her white hair. She looked at the temporary badge forgotten on top of the dresser. She looked at her own bare feet on the floor of the seamstress's apartment in Queens, and she felt for the first time that day a kind of fear that had nothing to do with losing the job. It had to do with gaining something for which she didn't yet have a name. Chapter 3. The Private Office. The Lexington station smelled of reheated coffee and the metallic perfume of the wet rail. Natasha got off the train with her bag pressed tightly against her hip, dodging a bike messenger cursing in 3 languages, and climbed the staircase with her chin down. Outside, Manhattan was waking up in a pale grey, the weekend still far off, Friday already carrying with it the urgency of someone who needs to close out accounts before lunch. Her phone rang in the pocket of her coat. It was Ren. "Tell me you're not getting off on the wrong floor on purpose just to pretend you got lost." Natasha laughed breathlessly, crossing the corner toward the tower. "I'm scared, Ren." "Scared of what, woman? You already survived that all-night meeting and the baby. After that, it's all downhill. Scared of going up, of walking in there and finding out it wasn't a mistake." Her friend laughed in that Brooklyn way before finishing the sentence. "Honey, a transfer to the 43rd floor isn't a mistake. It's an invitation, and nobody sends an invitation that big by mistake in this city." Natasha didn't answer. She kept walking, new shoes bought on sale, low heel, dark coat buttoned up to her neck. The Park Avenue wind cut across her face, as if testing whether she could really handle what was coming. "Tasha." Her friend's voice softened. "Chin up. You didn't ask for any of this." He did. The call dropped before she had time to make up some lie. The private elevator went up without stopping on the intermediate floors. When the doors opened on the 43rd floor, the air changed. It was quieter. The walls seemed taller even though they weren't. The windows began where the ceiling of her old office ended, floor-to-ceiling glass, and all of Manhattan spilled outside, with the pale sky licking the edges of the buildings. A man was standing waiting near the reception desk. Graphite grey suit, dark tie, hands folded in front of his body. Natasha recognized his face before any introduction. Phelan Crow, founding partner, widower, the second name on the building. Ren had described him once. Phelan is the only one who makes Cooper drop his guard. She noticed his hands folded in front of his body, the straight way he greeted her with a nod. "Miss Vale." "Mr. Crow." "Phelan is fine." His voice was dry but not cold. "I'll show you the office. Mr. Halloran will be here in 20 minutes. He walked ahead without filling the air with unnecessary explanations. Natasha appreciated that. People who speak less save other people's ears for the moments that matter. "This is the private kitchen." Phelan opened a light wooden door. "Here, the small conference room for up to 8 people. To the right, the main office. To the left, your desk." Her desk was dark oak, the surface polished, 2 large monitors, a green-shaded lamp from another century. Behind it, a full window showed the East River shimmering in scales. Natasha set down her bag slowly, as if afraid of waking someone. "The formal justification is travel support," Phelan said without looking directly at her. "The informal one, the whole floor figured out on its own. She looked up. He held her gaze. "No irony, Miss Vale. Just so you're not surprised by whispers." "Thank you." Phelan gave the ring another quarter turn, hesitated, and added in a lower voice, "He doesn't transfer anyone to this floor. In 11 years, you're the first." The sentence landed in her stomach before it reached her head. Natasha just nodded, because any word would have come out shaky. The morning moved fast from the moment Phelan arrived. Calendars, confirmations, 3 calls to Tokyo, an email to a Swiss banker whose signature had more letters than her own full name. Cooper appeared shortly before noon, black suit, the same calm as always, grey eyes passing across the monitors before landing on her. "Miss Vale." "Mr. Halloran." "Lunch at 1. Tribeca. You're coming with me." It wasn't a request. It also wasn't an order. It was a fact announced in a low voice, as if he were just informing her of a weather forecast. Natasha nodded. He turned around and went back into his office, closing the door with the precision of a man who never slams anything. Ren sent a voice memo at 12:30. "Tasker, I saw you go up. You alive? Send a message if you're alive." She replied with a heart emoji and turned off her phone. The car was black and silent. The driver, a grey-haired man who greeted Natasha with a discreet nod, opened the back door. Cooper was already seated, reading a folder. He didn't look up when she got in, but the moment the door closed, he turned his body slightly in her direction. That was all. A small gesture, maybe automatic. Natasha pretended not to notice. The restaurant in Tribeca had no sign. A dark door, a man in a jacket behind it, and then a room lined with dark green velvet, tables set far enough apart so that no one could overhear anyone. The maitre d' welcomed Cooper with a nod that looked like a contained bow. "Reserved table, Mr. Halloran." They sat down. The waiter served water with ice and lemon before being asked. Cooper placed his hands on the table, long fingers, no ring. "Do you eat properly, Natasha?" The question dropped on her like a small stone in a calm lake. "What do you mean? Do you skip meals? Do you have coffee instead of lunch?" She almost laughed out of nervousness. She picked up the menu just to have somewhere to rest her eyes. "Whatever fits the time." "Today you'll eat what I order." His voice stayed low. "No fuss. Just a hot meal." The waiter came back. Cooper ordered without looking at the menu, in soft French, 2 dishes. Natasha waited for him to step away to murmur, "Anything that doesn't cost my rent." Cooper didn't laugh, but the corner of his mouth shifted 0.5 millimeter, and the waiter, returning with the bread, had to pretend he hadn't heard. Natasha wanted to bury her face in the sleeve of her coat. "How is your mother?" The question disarmed her. She looked down at the white tablecloth for a second, adjusting her voice before letting it out. "She has good days and bad days. Her appointment with the specialist is next month." She breathed in. "That's why the job, that's why all of it." He nodded once. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He didn't say, "I can imagine." He just stored the information inside those grey eyes, the way someone places an important document into a labelled folder. "Do you sew?" "My mother sews." "I just hold the thread when she needs me to." "And what do you do when you're not here?" Natasha smiled for the first time during that lunch. "I sleep. I pay bills. I call her. I have coffee with Ren on Sunday mornings." "And for yourself?" The question hung between the silverware. Natasha didn't know how to answer right away. She thought about lying, about saying something quick, but the grey of his eyes wouldn't allow small lies. "It's been a while since I asked myself that." Cooper lowered his gaze to the glass. His fingers touched the rim of the crystal, then pulled back. "Start asking," he said, without looking at her. "I'll wait." The plate arrived. It was simple and warm, a white fish with vegetables. Natasha ate slowly, and noticed in the middle of the meal that he had reorganized the week's calendar without mentioning it. There were no longer any commitments after 8 in the evening on it. She only found out because, upon returning to the office, she opened the calendar and saw the slots cleared like small windows of breathing room. The afternoon went by at a civilized pace. Phelan stopped by twice, spun his ring, made a comment about exchange rates and left. Cooper signed stacks of contracts without complaining. When the clock struck 10 in the evening, he walked into her antechamber, closed his jacket and said in that low voice that always seemed closer than it actually was, "The driver will take you home. I can take the subway." "She's going in the car, Natasha." It was the first time he had called her by her first name without the last. She didn't comment. He didn't either. In the back seat, Manhattan night sliding by outside, Natasha watched the lights of the bridge break across the windows and, without thinking, started talking. "There's an inn in Charleston, South Carolina. It belongs to a childhood friend of mine. It sits right on the beach. White roof, wooden porch that creaks." She smiled at the window. "It's the only place where I've ever been able to sleep without dreaming of a bill to pay." The driver said nothing. Cooper, beside her in the back seat, turned his head half a centimeter. He didn't comment. He just stored the information in the same invisible file where he had stored the question about her mother. Natasha got out in front of the building in Queens, said thank you, closed the car door carefully, and went up the stairs without looking back. Up there, Marisol was already awake, needle in hand, the TV on low. "Sweetheart, how was it?" "It was different, Mom." Her mother smiled without asking anything else. Mothers in Queens know the difference between daughters who come home tired and daughters who come home thinking about someone. At midnight, Wren sent an audio message. "Watch out for men who actually listen, Tasha. Those are the dangerous ones." Pause. A short laugh. "The ones who don't listen, you hang up and go to sleep. The ones who listen, you never sleep again." Natasha rested her head on the bedroom wall, her mother's needle still tapping out in the other room at a slow rhythm. The phone vibrated again. It wasn't Wren. It was the office number. The message had 2 lines. "Saturday night. Auction in Southampton. She's coming with me." Natasha read it 3 times before letting out her breath. And outside, in an apartment on Central Park West that she had never seen, the light in Cooper Halloran's home office stayed on for 2 more hours, a fact she would only come to know later, and that, on that night, she didn't yet suspect had anything to do with her. Chapter 4. The Whiskey Past Midnight. The dress was Wren's, black, no shimmer, high collar, low back. It fit Natasha as if her friend had bought it with her in mind. "You look gorgeous, Tasha." Wren adjusted the zipper in her mother's apartment, needle forgotten on the table. Marisol humming softly in the kitchen. "Gorgeous enough to scare a rich man." "I don't want to scare anyone." "That's exactly the problem. The ones who don't want to scare them more." The car horn sounded down on the street. Marisol appeared in the kitchen doorway, needle back in her hand, eyes shining. "Sweetheart, come home in one piece." "Always, Mum." The drive to Southampton was longer than she had imagined. Natasha had turned down the helicopter, not out of fear of heights, but out of respect for what it meant in Cooper's history, even though he hadn't asked her why. He had simply listened, turned to the driver and said, "We'll go by car." That was all. The auction house was near the ocean, but you couldn't see it. It was a white, low building, with yellow lighting and gardens that smelled of pine and old money. Natasha got out of the car with her chin up. Cooper waited for her outside, hand extended, not to touch her but to guide her step on the gravel. She rested the tips of her fingers on his palm. His skin burned, even in autumn. Inside, the hall hummed at low volume. Women in silk, men in tailored jackets, crystal flutes silently changing hands. Cooper introduced her to 3 people without flourishes, Natasha Vale, and each of them nodded as though they already knew she would be coming. The aunt arrived before dinner. Cordelia Halloran, Cooper's paternal aunt and guardian of the family's tradition, had her grey hair pulled low, a small brooch on the lapel of cream silk, a sentence ready on her mouth even before the greeting. "Ah, so you're the young lady." Natasha extended her hand. "Cordelia Halloran, I presume." "Presume away." The aunt smiled just enough that no one around would notice it wasn't a welcoming smile. Her eyes moved over the borrowed dress, the low heels, the simple earring. Cooper has always had a taste for the unexpected. "Lucky me, then." Cordelia touched the brooch on her chest. It was a quick gesture, almost imperceptible, but Natasha saw it. The woman hesitated half a second before responding, "I like you. You have backbone." It wasn't exactly a compliment, but it also wasn't poison. Cordelia stepped away, brooch touched once more before she disappeared among the other silk silhouettes. Cooper observed the scene from a distance, glass in hand, without coming closer. When Natasha met his eyes, he simply tilted his head once. It was a silent yes. "You handled it, I saw." The auction began. Paintings, jewelry, family furniture, a small wristwatch in pale gold, a faded dial, a worn leather strap. The auctioneer described it in 2 sentences. Turn-of-the-century piece, property of a family that had broken apart. Cooper raised his paddle without hesitating. Natasha saw his spine straighten before the bid even came. He won. When he received the small box, he brought it close to his chest and stayed silent for a minute. His hand rested on top of the case, as if the watch inside were alive. Natasha didn't have to ask whose it was. She recognized the shape of his silence, the same shape as the photograph she had seen twice on the shelf in his office. An older man, the same grey eyes, smiling at a 9-year-old child. They left before midnight. Cooper didn't speak in the car. Natasha didn't either. The driver entered Manhattan over the Queensboro Bridge and she expected him to drop her off at home. That's not what happened. "Tower first," Cooper said to the driver softly. Natasha didn't ask anything. The empty office was a strange creature past midnight. The lights on the 43rd floor remained off, except for the green lamp on her desk and a single bulb that Cooper switched on in his office. He took off his jacket slowly, hung it on the leather hook behind the door. He undid his collar with 2 fingers without looking at her, and the gesture was so private that Natasha looked away as if she had seen something not meant for her. He took a bottle from the bottom drawer of the shelf. Amber whiskey, a discreet label. He poured 2 short glasses. He held hers out without coming closer than necessary. "I don't really know how to drink that, Mr. Halloran." "Cooper." "Cooper." He sat in the armchair across from her. The desk between them seemed to be everything and nothing at the same time. "What is it like to have a mother who still calls you Natasha?" The question landed loose in the middle of the room. Natasha brought the glass to her lips, felt the burn at the back of her throat, and answered without rehearsing. "It's like having somewhere to go back to, even on the days when you don't want to go back anywhere." Cooper nodded slowly. His eyes followed the faint light of the lamp for a second before settling on his own hands. "My father had a helicopter. He liked to fly in the mornings before meetings. He thought it cleared his head." His voice was low but firm. "I told him the night before that it was idiotic to fly with that fog they were forecasting. He laughed and said I sounded like an old man." She didn't reply. She just listened, the way he had listened to her at the restaurant. "I buried his watch with him. I couldn't stand to look at it." The corner of his mouth moved without smiling. "Years later, I found out my aunt had sold it, along with other things, to a family that bought the country estate." He spun the glass between his fingers. "Today I brought it back." The distance between the 2 glasses seemed to contain the whole story. "He wouldn't blame you, Cooper." "I know." Pause. "But I blame myself. And that's different." Natasha stayed silent. There was nothing she could say to make it any smaller. Instead of speaking, she lifted her glass slightly. He lifted his. They tapped at the height of the tabletop without coming closer. That in that room was the most intimate gesture of the night. Cooper stood up shortly afterward. He gathered the glasses. He turned off the lamp. He picked up his jacket. She followed, without him having to ask. In the car, on the way to Queens, she realized he hadn't touched her once during the entire night. Not even to adjust a strand of hair, not even to steady her on the gravel any more than with the tip of his fingers. He drew close and pulled away like a tide that can't decide on its hour. A few blocks from her building, Cooper turned around in the front seat. He didn't come any closer. He just spoke, in the lowest voice she had ever heard come out of that man. "Call me baby again." Natasha laughed breathlessly, her throat tightening. "Right here in the car?" "Right here in the car." She held his gaze for 2 seconds. The grey eyes didn't blink. His hands stayed on his knee without moving. "Baby." Cooper closed his eyes for half a second. Just that, and the entire tide broke inside the car, without either of them moving so much as a millimeter. The driver, with the trained discretion of someone who had been working there for years, kept his eyes on the rear view of the street, not on the one inside. Natasha got out in front of the building. Cooper waited for her to go in before signaling the car to drive on. She saw it through the reflection of the lobby glass. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs in silence, leaned her back against the apartment door from the inside, and stayed there, hand over her mouth, feeling her heart beat in a place in her body where she didn't know she had a heart. Marisol was sleeping on the couch, needle dropped in her lap, a spool of white thread rolling slowly across the rug. Natasha picked the thread up off the floor, wound it back up, covered her mother with the old shawl, and went to her room. She rested her head on the pillow and didn't sleep, because the coldest man in Manhattan had asked for one word from her as if it were medicine, and because she, without having predicted any of it, had handed over the word as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Outside, the early Saturday morning continued bright over Queens. Chapter 5. Champagne at the Plaza. Her mother's apartment smelled of fresh fabric and chamomile tea. Marisol was sitting in the armchair in the living room, needle between her fingers, adjusting an invisible hem on the bottom of the ivory dress hanging from the hanger next to the window. The late afternoon light came in slanted, passed through the silk and drew light shadows on the hardwood floor. Natasha was fixing her hair in front of the hallway mirror, still in her robe, trying to figure out how to pin the strands without it looking like too much effort. Ren, sitting on the floor, was eating a green apple, as though it were movie popcorn. "Easy there, sis," Ren said, biting into the fruit. "You're going to the plaza, not the gallows. Although, let's be honest, the dress is worthy of both." Marisol lifted her eyes over her half-moon glasses and smiled without showing her teeth. "My girl is going to shine. Take the heels out of the box, Ren, before I die of nervous excitement." Ren obeyed with a short laugh, and Natasha felt her chest tighten in a good way. It had been a long time since her mother had laughed at something said by someone else. The new health insurance, the appointment scheduled, her name already circulating on the top floor of a Manhattan tower, all of that seemed to have arrived from a life that wasn't hers. She got dressed in front of the mirror in her mother's room. The silk fell down to her feet, cool and light. Marisol adjusted the strap with the hand of a seamstress, checked the inside seam with her nail, and just whispered, "You don't ask anyone for permission today. Promise." "I promise, Mom." Marisol gave her blessing through the half-open door when the doorman announced that the car had arrived. Cooper's driver was the same as always. He said nothing beyond good evening. The drive into Manhattan was made in a soft silence, with the city reflected in the windows like a movie running in reverse. Natasha squeezed the small bag in her lap. For the first time, she wasn't carrying her resume inside it. The plaza appeared all at once, golden, with the marquee lit by lamps that looked like small yellow stars. Cooper was waiting on the top step, black suit, dark tie, hands in his pants pockets. When he saw her get out of the car, he slowly took his hands out of his pockets as if he needed them for something else. He didn't say, "You look beautiful." He just held out his elbow and looked at her mouth a second longer than he should have. "Ready?" His voice low near her ear. "Ready." They walked in together. The hall was a whirlpool of silk, silver, and crystal. Phelan Crow was standing near one of the columns, glass in hand, ring spinning slowly between his thumb and index finger. When he saw Natasha, he stopped the gesture for half a second, raised his glass half a centimeter, and went back to spinning the ring as if nothing had happened. "Miss Vale." Phelan's voice came out dry, but the corner of his mouth gave him away. "The hall has improved since you arrived. You lie too well for a man of few words." "Practice," he replied, before raising his glass in Cooper's direction. Cooper introduced her to 3 directors in a row. Firm handshakes, polite smiles, looks of quick inspection. Natasha greeted each of them with her chin in exactly the right position. His hand rested lightly on her back during the entire round of introductions, not on her waist, not yet, but on her shoulder blade, on a neutral spot that even so burned through the silk. That's when Sterling Marchetti approached. "Halloran, the quarterly numbers are 2 points below projection." "Good evening, Sterling," Cooper replied without moving a muscle in his face. "Good evening, as I was saying." Behind Sterling came Jade. Natasha recognized her even before hearing the name. Red dress, long neck, hair pinned up in a way that looked careless and had certainly taken 3 hours. The smile was sideways, rehearsed, an exact curve at the corner of the mouth. Her eyes passed over Natasha like someone checking a price tag. "Cooper," she said in soft French and then in English, "won't you introduce me to your companion?" "Natasha Vale," Cooper answered without ornament. "Jade Marchetti." "Charmed," Jade said. The hand extended cold, a 2-second pressure that stretched into a third just to make a point. "Vale." "Vale from where?" "From Queens." "How adorable." Cooper was pulled aside by Sterling toward one side of the hall. Phelan went along reluctantly, with a quick warning glance at Natasha. It was enough for Jade to widen her sideways smile by another millimeter. "Come with me, dear. I'll show you where the decent restroom is." "The other one is a disaster." Natasha didn't refuse. Refusing would give Jade the pleasure of noticing that she had understood. They walked together along the side corridor, heels tapping out an uneven rhythm on the marble. Jade picked up 2 glasses of champagne on the way and held one out to Natasha. "I'm too old for runarounds, so I'll save you the time." Her voice dropped to a silken whisper. Cooper is a fascinating man. Deep, complicated, with that aura of a man who's lost too much. And I get it, I fell for it too, but dear, he just collects new toys. Did you like the embroidery? Natasha didn't answer. She just kept walking. "Did he introduce you to the directors today?" "How sweet." "He introduced me to his father once, you know, before the helicopter. After that, he never introduced anyone to anyone again. Until now." "Enjoy it." That's when Jade tripped. The trip was careful, a small loss of balance with the heel on the smooth marble, calculated with the precision of a woman who had already rehearsed it at home in front of the mirror. The entire glass of champagne landed on the chest of the ivory dress. The cold liquid ran down the silk, soaked through the fabric, found Natasha's skin underneath. "Oh my God," Jade said, hand to her mouth. "How clumsy of me. Do you want a tissue?" The hall had seen, not the whole hall, but enough. 3 heads turned. A photographer lowered her camera out of professional reflex. Natasha felt the heat rise up her neck, as if someone had opened an oven behind her. "No, thank you." She crossed the corridor without running. She pushed open the door of the women's restroom and went in. The restroom was all white, with light coming from above, no shadows. Natasha placed both hands on the marble sink. The image in the mirror wasn't shaking. Her eyes weren't red. The dress had a large, irregular stain that ran down like an upside-down flower. She breathed, once, twice. The third one already came in fully. She thought of her mother in the armchair with the needle. She thought of Marisol saying, "You don't ask anyone for permission today." She thought of the Monday subway, the rent paid, the health insurance, the appointment scheduled, Cooper Halloran's name circulating before the second day. She thought of the empty office, the whiskey, his glass and her glass, the distance between the 2 glasses. She thought of the baby and the way he had closed his eyes. She took the handkerchief out of her bag. She pressed it against the silk. She didn't rub, she pressed. She let the cloth drink up what it could. She looked at herself one last time, fixed the strap that Marisol had stitched again that afternoon, and opened the door. The hall was just as she had left it. Cooper had his back turned, talking with Sterling. Jade was talking with a silver-haired woman, a fresh glass in hand, the sideways smile intact. Natasha walked across the floor. She didn't walk fast. She didn't walk slow. She walked at the exact pace of someone coming home. Cooper saw her even before she reached him. His hand was holding a half-full glass, his mouth opened by 0.5 millimeter. Natasha extended her fingers, took the glass from his hand with the calm of someone picking up a book from a shelf, brought it to her lips, took a long sip and handed the empty glass back. The silence of the circle around them lasted 3 seconds. They felt like 30. Cooper looked at her. He just looked. And then, without rushing, he slid his right hand along her waist, secured her against his own hip and went back to talking with Sterling as if nothing had changed. "As I was saying," he said, voice identical, "the 2 points off this quarter are correctable. Sterling, do you know Natasha?" Mr. Marchetti." Jade, 3 steps to the left, saw everything. The sideways smile failed for the first time that night. Just one corner, just one instant. But it failed. Cooper got her out of the hall before midnight. In the car, he said nothing. His hand stayed on her waist even after she was already seated. He just looked at the window. His fingers opened and closed once over the stained silk. The Central Park West apartment was all glass and low lighting. The terrace opened onto the dark park like a black hole dotted with small lamps. Cooper led her to the railing without letting go of her hand. The November cold bit Natasha's bare back for the first time, and she realized she had forgotten her coat at the plaza. He took off his jacket and covered her shoulders. "Cooper." "Wait." He brushed a strand of hair from her face with the back of his fingers. Not slowly, decisively. The grey eyes didn't blink. "It's not a collection," he said. "It's you." Natasha opened her mouth to answer. He didn't wait. He leaned in and kissed her. His right hand came up to the back of her neck, fingers spread in her hair, thumb behind her ear. The kiss was long, slow, in no hurry at all, as if he had waited months for that second and wasn't going to waste it rushing. When he pulled back, it was only enough to rest his forehead on hers. "Stay. I'll stay." He guided her inside. The bedroom door closed behind them. Morning came with light grey light, coming in through the half-open curtain. Natasha woke up first. The bed was too wide. The sheets smelled of sandalwood. She lay there listening to the breathing of the man beside her, for an amount of time she couldn't measure. She got up barefoot. Cooper's white shirt was tossed on the armchair. She put it on over her skin and walked across the corridor. The kitchen was spacious with a light marble countertop and 2 cups already laid out. It seemed like a sign that he had thought of her before going to sleep. Natasha touched the edge of one of the cups. The marble was cold under her feet. Cooper appeared in the doorway, also barefoot. Pajama pants, white t-shirt, hair tousled for the first time since she had known him. No suit, no tie. The grey eyes seemed lighter without the weight of the office. He didn't say good morning. He just walked across the kitchen, stopped behind her, rested his forehead on the back of her neck, and breathed in deeply once. "Coffee?" he asked, voice hoarse. "Coffee." He made it. Natasha sat on the high stool. When he handed her the cup, it was her turn not to be able to look away. They drank in silence. It wasn't the silence of the office. It was the silence of 2 people who had just understood that, if they wanted, they would have every morning. His phone vibrated on the counter. Cooper glanced quickly at the screen, turned the device face down, and went back to his coffee. He didn't comment. He didn't ostentatiously turn it off. He just chose not to look. "Next week," he said after a sip. "Board of Directors. I want you there, as my girlfriend." Natasha set down the cup. "Are you sure?" "I've been sure since the afternoon of the rain." She laughed quietly, breathless, and lowered her eyes to the marble. "Then okay." Cooper brought his hand over to hers on the counter. He just rested it. He didn't press. Natasha looked at the face-down screen of the phone on the stone, and for a very brief instant, the size of a blink, felt something pass over her shoulder. Light, cold, nameless. It was gone before she could recognize it. She squeezed his hand back. Chapter 6. That which was still blinking. The car stopped in front of the building on Central Park West 10 minutes before 8. Natasha got out, holding the hem of her wool coat against the November wind. In her pocket, inside the silk lining, was the small string of pearls that Marisol had taken out of the velvet case that afternoon and wrapped around her daughter's neck with steady hands. "It belonged to my mother," Marisol had said, needle in her other hand. "It isn't expensive, but it's yours." Natasha had felt the small weight of the pearls along her throat throughout the entire ride. The doorman greeted her by name. She went up alone. The key Cooper had left her the week before opened the door without creaking. The intimate sitting room had its lights low. Cooper was waiting for her standing, near the tall window. Navy blue suit this time, not black. He turned when he heard the door and crossed the room in 3 strides. He kissed her temple in silence, lingered half a second longer with his hand on the back of her neck, and only then pulled back. "The board is arriving. I saw the cars downstairs." Cordelia came. Natasha lifted her head. "You hadn't said she was coming." "She said so 20 minutes ago." His mouth moved half a millimeter, the closest to a smile he usually came while standing. Nobody knows why. Natasha breathed in. Cooper held out his arm. She linked hers through it. They walked down the corridor, arm in arm. The dining room was set with the good china, tall glasses, low candles that didn't get in the way of the view across the table. Phelan was standing near the head, glass in hand, ring spinning, until the moment Natasha walked in. Then it stopped again. This time it didn't go back to spinning. "Miss Vale," he said, and this time the greeting carried weight. "Welcome to the home." Natasha felt the heat rise up her neck. She squeezed his hand back. Cordelia was seated on the other side of the table, dark tweed dress, sapphire brooch on her left chest. When she saw Natasha, she touched the brooch once slowly with 2 fingers. Then she lifted her head and examined her from top to bottom. There was no smile, but also no scorn, just a careful evaluation that lasted 3 seconds. "Miss Vale," Cordelia said, voice measured, "sit next to me for coffee if you'd allow me." It was an announcement, not a request. Natasha bowed her head slightly. "It will be an honor, Mrs. Halloran." Cordelia. Cordelia. The other directors began filing in. 7 men and 2 women, varying ages, their guarded expressions relaxing one by one as Cooper introduced Natasha by her full name. Not as an assistant, not as a companion, just as Natasha Vale. "Thank you for coming on a Sunday," Cooper said, standing at the head of the table, glass raised. "Before the formal toast to the quarterly numbers, I wanted to introduce you to something that concerns me, not the company. This is Natasha. We are together." A short sentence. No flourishes. Cooper looked at every face at the table with that calmness that didn't ask for approval. Phelan raised his glass before anyone else. "To Natasha," he said. "Who has put up with this man better than the rest of us for 10 years? The laughter around the table was small and controlled, but genuine. Cordelia took a sip without comment. Natasha sat down. Dinner flowed in low waves of conversation. Natasha answered when asked and listened when she wasn't. Cooper kept his hand on her thigh under the table nearly the entire time, an invisible gesture to the others, a firm, warm weight for her. When coffee was served, Cordelia tapped lightly on the seat next to her. Natasha switched chairs. "I was rude to you in Southampton," Cordelia said, not looking at her, slowly stirring sugar into her tea instead of coffee. "It was ungracious of me. I thought you would be like the others. You weren't." Natasha didn't know how to respond. Cordelia continued, "There is a box in Connecticut with some family things. When the time is right, I'll have it brought over." "Cordelia, I didn't say today." Her voice dropped half a tone. "I said, when the time is right." Cooper appeared behind the 2 of them, his hand resting on the back of Natasha's chair. He said nothing. He only listened. Cordelia arched an eyebrow toward him. "You're late, Cooper. I've already decided to like her." "Me too," he replied softly. The directors said their goodbyes one by one. Phelan was the last. He shook Natasha's hand with that dry grip she was already learning to recognize as a hug. "He's different," Phelan whispered. "Take care of him." "I will." Phelan spun his wedding ring once on his way to the elevator, but without the mechanical tick from before. It was the movement of someone who remembered and moved on. When the door closed, only the soft silence of the apartment remained. Cooper blew out the candles with a cupped hand. Natasha began to gather the napkins. "Leave it," he said. "Come." They went upstairs. The bedside lamp in the bedroom was already on. Cooper unbuttoned his shirt in silence, slowly, without any theatre. He hung his clothes on the chair the way he hung up the day's plans. Natasha carefully removed her pearl necklace and set it on the nightstand. "It was my grandmother's," she said. "My mother put it on me this afternoon." Cooper looked at the necklace on the wood for a moment too long to be polite. "Thank you." "For what?" "For bringing it." They lay down. The bedside light was turned off. Natasha rested her head on his chest. His hand settled on the nape of her neck, fingers spread, wrist firm. His breathing slowed first. She could tell by the rhythm rising and falling beneath her temple. For the first time in a long while, Natasha fell asleep without making a mental list for the next day. The first time she woke up, it was before the alarm. The room was a very dark blue, the kind that hasn't quite decided to become morning yet. Natasha reached for the nightstand, looking for her glass of water. There was no glass. She had forgotten it. She got up carefully so as not to wake him. Cooper was sleeping on his stomach, one arm stretched out to her side as if searching for something. His dark hair fell over his forehead. Natasha stood still for a second, just watching, the man who never blinked, sleeping like anyone else. She walked out barefoot. The hallway was cold. She filled a glass in the kitchen and returned. As she re-entered the room, she saw his phone screen light up on the side table. The first vibration she could have ignored, the second as well. It was the third that caught her attention. The screen was facing up. The device had no lock protection on the notifications, just the name in clear letters at the top. Jade. The screen went dark. She stared at the black device for 3 full seconds, hoping she had imagined it. The screen lit up again. Jade, and once more. Jade. 4 in the morning, according to the digital clock next to it. Whoever calls at 4 in the morning calls because they want to be answered. Whoever calls 3 times, with their name in clear letters, knows they can call. Natasha didn't touch the device. She didn't pick up the phone, didn't unlock it, didn't read it, didn't do anything that another woman, less exhausted, would have done in that position. She simply remained standing by the bed, barefoot, the glass of water growing cold in her hand. She looked at Cooper. He was sleeping. His chest rose and fell in peace, without visible guilt, without a flinch. His hand, stretched toward her empty side, had remained there the whole time. The screen went dark for the 4th time. It didn't light up again. Natasha set the glass of water on her side of the table, lay back down, and rested her head on his shoulder. In his sleep, Cooper wrapped his arm around her without waking up. But the chill at the nape of her neck didn't go away. It wasn't the cold of the room nor the cold of the marble in the kitchen. It was a thin, long chill from within, the kind that enters through the skin and doesn't leave just because someone closes the window. Natasha closed her eyes. She tried to sleep. She tried. Cooper's breathing was calm. His hand was firm. The room smelled of sandalwood. The window was closed. And on the side table, even though the screen had been dark for minutes, something still seemed to be blinking.
Hey, Rowan here. That's it for Book 1, but guess what? Book 2 is already done. You can grab access to it for just a small fee.
3 months after that first night on the Central Park West Terrace, Cooper's apartment no longer seemed too large for Natasha. There was fresh coffee before she could even ask, a sweater forgotten on his chair, the warmth of his hand on her waist at dawn, and that dangerous kind of silence that made a woman believe she had finally been chosen. Perhaps Natasha would have called it peace, perhaps even love, until that Sunday in February when her own phone began to vibrate incessantly. First came the photos. Cooper leaving a boutique hotel in Soho, shirt disheveled, hair wet, an expression too guarded to be innocent. Then, the screenshots, intimate messages, meeting times. And before Natasha could decide if it was a lie or a punishment, Jade Marchetti appeared at the building's front desk. Calm, beautiful, cruelly confident. She looked directly at Natasha and said, "I'm pregnant. It's his. He knows." Natasha didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't go down to beg for an explanation. She only felt that thin chill rising up the back of her neck, the same one a woman feels when she understands that perhaps she was never loved. Perhaps just a poor mistress. Because it may be that some betrayals happen in hotel rooms, but the cruelest one begins in the bed, where he still holds her as if he hasn't destroyed everything.
Like I said, that was just a taste of Book 2. To watch it uncensored, just click on the first link here in the pinned comment. I'll see you on the other side in a few seconds. Remember, just click on the first link down here in the comments, and Book 2 complete, no ads, no interruptions, will already be available for you. It's very simple. Book 2 is something I'm loving making. You're loving it too, so I promise there will be more. It's where you find increasingly spicy stories, a true dark romance. And precisely because this version is getting more and more heated, the video isn't well accepted publicly on YouTube. This closed environment is where I can actually share my essence and where I feel free to do my best work for you. More news coming soon. I'll be waiting for you on the other side. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people have been downloading our audio, effectively copying the entire story, and just re-uploading it to YouTube. If you want to watch the original story and be the first to get the next ones, search for My Stories by Rowan on YouTube for the best billionaire and CEO romance content. Remember, the official channel is My Stories by Rowan on YouTube and the My Stories platform. I'll be waiting for you there. Love, Rowan. Congratulations! Your purchase has been confirmed, and you now have full access to books 1 and 2 of all our stories, completely ad-free and uninterrupted. Everything is available on the My Stories platform, from Mafia Romance and Billionaire Romance to our spicier tales. This content is ready for you now, with new episodes added daily. Access is simple. Just log in using the same email address you used for your purchase. A confirmation has also been sent to that same email. The My Stories platform is very simple and intuitive. Each image represents a story. If it has a book 2, just click and press play. Everything is already unlocked for you. You can also rate each story, leave a like, and write a comment. Your feedback will be visible to all our other subscribers. This is our romance universe, so please feel free to interact. From this moment on, this is officially your home for romance stories. Just head over to mystoriesromance.com and press play. Welcome to the family.